and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick, with the Hampton City Marketing and Communications Department. And today, my guest is Ron Jackson. Ron is the executive director of the Hampton Redevelopment and Housing Authority. See, even I tripped over that because it's a little bit of a mouthful. Welcome, Ron. It's good to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
First, before we talk about your agency, I just want to talk about you and how you came to Hampton. You're newer than I am, so it makes me feel like an old hand. I like being around you. When did you get here?
It was June of last year that I was appointed by the Board of Commissioners, the Hampton Redevelopment Housing Authority, to be their executive director. So I've been here a little over a year now.
Oh my gosh, it doesn't seem like that long.
I know.
Does it to you?
No, it doesn't. No, it does not at all.
And what's your background? Where did you come from?
I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. I spent 4 years after high school, 4 years in the military, and then after that I went to University of Cincinnati, graduated from there, and then had some moved here for a little bit in the Chesapeake area. So I actually started out in housing with the Chesapeake Redevelopment Housing Authority. And I worked there for a while, and I had the opportunity to go back to Ohio to be closer to family. And my job right before I started in Hampton was with Lucas County Housing Authority, which is in Toledo, Ohio.
See, I thought you were from Toledo. I didn't know you were from Cincinnati.
I'm from Ohio. But,
I'm from Hamilton, Ohio.
Oh, are you?
Yeah,
I know that's just north of Cincinnati.
Yeah, very close.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Well, it's good to have you in Hampton.
Okay.
Now, I think a lot of people think of the Redevelopment and Housing Authority, if they think of it, as being an arm of the city government. Right. But you're really not. No,
we're not. We're considered a subdivision of the state. And there's state legislation, principally in Title 36 of the Virginia State Code, that governs the creation of housing authorities and how the boards appointed, which boards are appointed typically by the local municipal governments. But after that, that's pretty much the role that the city plays in the governance of housing authority. The citizen boards are the ones that create the policy for the housing authority. And that's who we currently serve under the Citizens Board, 7-member Citizens Board.
Okay,
but they're completely independent agencies.
So that's, I think it's a little confusing though, because people may think that because council is the one who appoints them, that they work for council, but it's not really true.
It's not really true. They just appoint, like I said, a citizens board, and that board is supposed to help establish policy for the housing authority.
Now, most people think that, and they do shorten it, like, I mean, I always do too, it's the housing authority.
Yes.
And you run public housing, and that's the extent of what you and your organization do.
Yes. Because during the Industrial Revolution, you had a lot of dense type neighborhoods that, after a while, they became old and decrepit, and they were unsanitary. So the federal government funneled money through the housing authorities to actually help demolish those and replace them with new type structures. So redevelopment function and housing function sort of go hand in hand.
Okay, all right, that makes sense to me now.
Okay.
So in Hampton, you guys are working on a couple of redevelopment projects.
Correct.
And one of those is the former Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind.
Yes.
And I think that there's been some criticism at some of the public planning meetings because people assume you're going to move in there and put a large public housing. You're going to move Lincoln Park or create a second Lincoln Park and make a big concentration of low-income people there.
Well, that's not true, and that may have been the thought a couple years ago, because I guess the thinking was that if the housing authority was going to pursue demolition of Lincoln Park, that they needed a place for the residents to reside, and that the Virginia school site was available. But generally that's not the case in large redevelopment projects involving public housing. Typically, what the HUD does is, if you're
and HUD is the federal agency,
the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development,
which
we get our primary source of funding from them. They provide the funding for public housing as well as Section 8. But with public housing, if it qualifies for demolition, what HUD does is they issue what they call vouchers, which gives the current residents at the time that HUD approves it for demolition, they give them the opportunity to move somewhere else with a voucher, wherever they're accepted throughout the city, or they can primarily go wherever they want to. They also may have the opportunity to move back to the new development once it's developed. But in order for the demolition to proceed, that's the mechanism that the housing authorities use to have the residents relocate. Now, not that everyone will be able to relocate, but they don't all have to relocate to one particular area. It's not like you move in the residents and they have to go, for example, to the Virginia school site. So once I think everyone got an understanding of that we didn't necessarily need the Virginia school site in order to move forward with Lincoln Park. So actually those two projects, even though we're pursuing them at the same time, they're actually independent of each other.
But now in redevelopment, you keep being in the news for a couple of projects, and one is very, very closely tied with the city, which is the Harbour Square apartments downtown.
Yes.
What is the status of that? I know the city paid for it, but you guys are going to handle the redevelopment portion, or at least parts of it.
Yeah, we've handled the relocation. When we took it over around the end of last 2011, when we took over that, and we managed to relocate the residents.
And that was not public housing, and I think some people thought it was, but it was not. But maybe a fourth or a third of those people were on Section 8.
Yes,
okay,
correct.
so that's federal assistance, but they can take that somewhere else.
Exactly. We didn't have any ownership of the development at all. But what we're able to do is to help relocate the residents, and the residents primarily were there. It was sort of like a magnet because there weren't a lot of standards in terms of resident selection. Most of the people had issues that they had to deal with, so Harbour Square was available, and like I said, they didn't have very many standards, and so there was a whole mixture of people there. And so when we had to relocate the people, it was a little difficult because some of them had credit issues, or maybe there was something in their background that wouldn't lend themselves to be acceptable to other developments or rental developments. But our staff did a really great job of working with them individually, each one of the residents, and try to find out what their issues were in terms of what would prohibit them from being able to move into another development. We were able to identify those. A lot of cases it was funding, being able to take care of past utility bills, because now they were being faced with having to get utilities in their name, which they didn't have to at Harbour Square. So we were able to work through sort of a myriad of problems to, for the most part, put people in a better position when they left Harbour Square.
Well, and certainly there were problems with that complex. It was many of those units were not ideal places to live.
They were not ideal, but I think we were able to put people in a lot better position, we worked with all the agencies, worked with the schools, and they were able to make exceptions to if a resident had to move out when there was a school-age child.
They let them finish the year.
They let them finish. So
that.
Really the city as a whole really stepped up to help the residents. But with our particular responsibilities, once we got the residents out, we have signed a contract with a demolition firm to actually start the demolition within 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, so really by September.
September time frame is when we'll start, and we're looking at it to last through maybe March of next year.
People forget how big
that
place is.
It is.
It was huge.
Yeah, it's huge, and then because of it came out that there's some hazardous materials and things within the building that we have to. The process would have gone a lot quicker if we didn't have to contend with the hazardous materials. But we're able to handle those.
The age of that building,
the age, asbestos,
find.
and things like that. But we've come up with a method to be able to handle that that's acceptable to EPA and OSHA. So that's going to slow down the process a little bit, but it's not going to make it any more costly for this, for us, for the city, in order to do the demolition. So. And
then there'll be some infrastructure. I know the city has wanted to put roads and
the courthouse,
chop up that into more manageable size.
Yeah, and then also expand to the courthouse.
It's very likely to land there. But that'll still leave quite a bit of land.
Exactly.
Now, when you begin to develop something, and I'm going to use the Virginia School as an example, you have a pretty extensive, similar to the city, public input process.
Yes.
So you have control over the development of how many acres at the Old Virginia School site? I know it's split, and there's some question about who can go
there's
where.
There's 75 in total. There's 50 that owned by the city. There's
Outright
25,
owned by the city that we
there's
bought from the
25
state.
that's controlled by the state, and there's
It's a little ownership of that. We'll just say it might
Yes.
revert to a trust of people that no longer exist.
Yeah.
Right.
So so we're in our planning process. We're still having to include the 25 acres and in the whole planning process, and getting resident input, which is what you typically do when you go through a planning process.
How many meetings do you think you've held now? Open public meetings, asking people if you have an idea about what should be here, whether you're in the neighborhood or you're a business or you live across town.
Right.
How many of those do you think you've had?
Well, I think we've had about 6 meetings. We've had 2 initial meetings where it was just basically talking about what types of concepts we could come up with. We narrowed it down to 2 types of concepts, more like a traditional, more of a new urbanist type, what they consider a concept. And those are principally, throughout the meetings, those have generally been acceptable to the different groups that we've met. And our last couple of meetings, we've met with the residents that are in the vicinity of the school site. And our view has always been that we always would like to involve the stakeholders, because it's going to be part of their neighborhood. You really can't.
That's right.
You
People
really
who
can't
live
have
there
an
will
isolated.
be,
they're going to be impacted some way, and so whatever issues they have, the school site itself, in terms of infrastructure and things like that, it's going to have an impact. And really, when you think of it, in order to get private investment to come in, if there's issues in the surrounding area, you're really not going to get it's not going to be attractive to developers when they see that. Yeah, if they're contributing to a problem, that pre-existing problem, if there's something with the surrounding neighborhood in terms of crime, in terms of home, just the construction of the homes, stability of the homes, all those things are, if we wanted to be a successful project, those are some of the things that we have to contend with. So we're looking at it in terms of like a master plan, more or less, for the area, because the school is not going to be like an enclave. It's not going to be can't be created in isolation from from the surrounding neighborhood. So we look at it. We're looking at this process of being an inclusive process. So it is difficult. It's easier, maybe in the short term, to go ahead and sort of say this is how we're going to do it. It's a lot difficult to work through a planning process where you try to get input and then try to get a consensus among the individuals on what's the best course of action. But in the long run, that's how you get buy-in, and I think it creates more sustainability for the project.
So I'm going to predict, Ron, that we're going to be hearing a whole lot more from you as some of these other projects roll forward.
Well, I hope so. I hope that we serve as whatever we do is for a benefit for the citizens of Hampton and for the city.
Then it does have that long-term thing. I mean, that's the thing about redevelopment. It's so easy and for a developer to come into an undeveloped county and buy a blank piece of land and start from scratch. And it's so much more complex in a built-out city. You guys, or the city, or both, have to acquire piece by piece by piece to create enough land to interest a private developer.
Yeah, just like you were talking about in Buck Road, sort of that same situation that, we have recently acquired some property, but I think that we need to get to the point where we have enough real estate to that would make it attractive for a private developer to come in. So that's where we see our function in working with the city.
Right, and you have to wait till the market's ready. I don't think people always understand, we buy property, but we can't bring that developer in tomorrow because the housing market is just it's just not there yet.
It's not there yet.
But we'll be ready, hopefully.
But we'll be ready, yes. Yes, we'll be ready.
When the economy picks up.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Ron, for coming by today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Good to have you.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for watching this episode of Round Robin.